What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG down there on the YouTube.com. Got a few more of these Kaladesh spoilers, and they spoiled a lot of stuff today. Most of it is, limited showcase stuff. This is going to be what you'll be playing in draft and sealed and stuff, but Wizards didn't disappoint. They did release a couple of cards today that are very much worthy of discussion. So let me run through all the draft fodder real quick, and we'll get to some stuff we can sink our teeth into. First, there's a cycle of common creatures that all have Fabricate. There's Ambitious Aetherborn, High Spire Artisan, and Weaponcraft Enthusiast. These are all, again, common creatures that have Fabricate of some form. I like Weaponcraft Enthusiast, even though it starts with no power. You can get 3 guys out of it for 3 mana. That could be worse. Probably my favorite of this cycle, but this cycle's just to show you, like, hey, check out some guys with Fabricate. That's cool. Aviator Mechanic, let's talk about this. Just 2 mana for a Dwarf Artificer at the 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you may return another target permanent you control to its owner's hand. Now, this one is kind of like White Man Lion, but not as good because it doesn't have flash, but it does hit permanents and not just creatures, but it's not going to like save them from instant speed removal or anything, even sorcery speed removal. But it can repeat ETBs, so there's that. I'm just not really seeing it being great outside of limited. This is Restoration Gearsmith right here. It's 4 mana for a 3/3 Human Artificer with, when Restoration Gearsmith enters the battlefield, return target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Well, this looks like a lot of value in the limited format, although it'll never make it out of there. This does seem like good value in limited. Nimble Innovator is 4 mana for a 2/2 Vidalcan Artificer, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Cards like these are usually good in limited environments. I don't see that being any different, but there's not really much more to say about the thing. Weldfast Wingsmith, which is awesome, it's alliterative, is 4 mana for a 3/3 Human Artificer. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it gains flying until end of turn. Wingsmith does. Again, just obvious draft fodder. 4 mana 3/3s are okay in limited, and this one gains flying, so that's not bad. Even if it is conditional, it's not the worst thing ever. Reckless Fireweaver, speaking of not the worst thing ever, is a 2 mana 1/3 Human Artificer with, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, Reckless Fireweaver deals 1 damage to each opponent. Now this could almost warrant FaceTime. I could show you my face and talk about this card for a second, but I'm not going to. I think that people are talking about putting this in a Thermo Alchemist deck, but that's counterintuitive because you have to play a bunch of artifacts and a bunch of instants and sorceries and stuff. And Alchemist is going to be the better card, hands down, than this. Although again, this will see limited play and could be in a budget, all artifacts deck or something in standard. That'd be fun to mess around with. As far as other stuff here, Brazen Scourge is a 3 mana 3/3 haste, which is almost standard playable in a sort of aggro deck. And we'll have to see. 3 mana 3/3 haste is not the worst thing ever, but it's not particularly great either. It's just okay. Demolish is reprinted, and that's a good time to reprint it. Right now, Demolish could almost be like main deck playable in limited, so I'm glad that Demolish is here. Experimental Aviator is a 5 mana 0/3 Human Artificer with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact tokens with flying. So Whirler Rogue cost 1 more and has flying himself. I guess that's what they did, is that they gave Whirler Rogue flying, but they took away 2 of its power and gave it a toughness. And then for all of that, they added 1 to the converted mana cost. Not as good as Rogue, I would say. Not quite as good as Whirler Rogue. Torch Gauntlet is 2 generic for an equipment. The equipped creature gets +2/+0, and you can equip it for 2 mana. A total of 4 to play and equip is a little much for +2/+0. Wizards, why don't you just give us Bonesaw? Not Bones, excuse me. Give us Bone Splitter, and we'll be happy. Just give us Bone Splitter, and we will shut up. There's Prophetic Prism, which is a reprint, and this card actually saw a fair amount of play. Last time it was printed in Gatecrash. Some people played it in the 3-color, or sometimes even the blue-white control deck, because it's a decent 2-drop that gets you a card and fixes your mana. So Prophetic Prism actually saw 4 of play in some stuff just a couple of years ago, and it might do it again. Who knows? I doubt it. This is Perpetual Timepiece right here. It's 2 generic for an artifact. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard if you tap it. And then you can pay 2 and exile the Timepiece to shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library. Now this is an interesting card and could almost warrant FaceTime too. I really like it in some strategies, but I don't think it'll do anything like Modern Dredge or Delve or anything. I'm not seeing it there. I don't think it's I don't think it's anywhere near good enough for real big time high end strategies or anything. But this does look at least decent in casual play, and I do feel like I could be missing something about the card. Obviously, there's Delirium in the format right now. And I'd really like if it said sacrifice Perpetual Timepiece, but that would lead to shenanigans. So I don't think the card's going to do anything too breathtaking, but it does look like an interesting piece. You know, mill yourself, get the value off of that, but you won't die because you can just exile the timepiece and reshuffle all those cards, at which point you lose all the synergy you just worked super hard for. But, you know, who knows. This is Disappearing Act right here, or Worse Vinditrick. I believe that's German, I hope I'm not wrong. It's 3 mana for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand and counter target spell. Now this could almost warrant FaceTime, although I do think that it could in a lot of situations be worse than cancel. I mean, you'll have a permanent to control to return to your hand. And there are times where it could be a creature with an ETB effect. That's obviously what this is for. An artifact with an ETB effect. You know, you can make Panharmonicon go off again. There are some things, you know, maybe a Planeswalker that's reached low loyalty, return it to your hand, counter a spell, and then play it fresh with, you know, renewed loyalty counters the next turn. I mean, those sound like good situations and all, but I feel like a lot of times Control is just going to be returning a land to its hand. And I could be wrong here. You know, in a blue-white or Esper Control shell, you could always return Reflector Mage to your hand. But you know, playing Reflector Mage in a Control shell in the first place, you know, has problems. You know, a great 3-mana tempo creature, yes, but do you want to spend 3 mana on your main phase, you know, early in the game? I don't know about that. So this card does, it presents interesting challenges, and it's like they put Deprive and Familiar's Ruse on one card, and they're just like, oh, we'll pay an extra mana for it. But once you start making people pay an extra mana for it, people think things like, well, is cancel better than this? So I'm not 100% sold on this, and some Control players are straight up mad. Here's Creative Spark right here, and I actually will show my face to talk about this card for a second. Creative Spark is just a red mana for a sorcery. Choose target creature. Exile the top card of your library. You may have Creative Spark deal damage to that creature equal to the converted mana cost of the exiled card. If you don't, you may play that card until end of turn. Okay, so really interesting card. Wizards has been doing this thing the last couple of years with Red, where their version of drawing cards is exile the top card of your library and you can play it if you want to. Not quite drawing a card and doesn't trigger when you draw a card things, you know, which can sometimes be kind of important. So I kind of like the card in that it's sort of draw a card for 1 mana, although there will be times where you can't play the card because you don't have the open mana and then the card's gone forever. There's that. There's also, I want to point out here, because a lot of people aren't getting this, that if you choose to make this burn to a creature, then you cannot then play the card. You get one or the other. You know, you can either kill a guy with the card that you reveal, or you can play the card you reveal, but you can't do both, which is kind of a problem. And sure, you can just rip a land off of this and then immediately play the land, so it could be viewed as draw a card for 1 mana, but it's not quite that. And it could be viewed as burn for just 1 mana, but it's not quite that either. It makes the card very versatile. You know, either card draw or removal they're both very powerful effects. So I do think the card could do something, especially at such a low mana cost. And we have things that scry in the standard format. You know, this works very well with scry too. So I do like the card. I'm just not 100% sure what it's going to do in standard. Here's Refurbish right here. It's 4 mana for a sorcery. Return target artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. Pretty simple. So it's basically Resurrect, or Resurrection, but for artifacts instead of creatures. Same mana costs and everything. Which is at least cool design, you know, and we'll wait to see what kind of impact that has in the format. We will see a giant creature a little bit later. I'm going to end these spoilers with it. That this can fish right out of your graveyard for just the 4 mana, so that seems really good, you know. I feel like this could have some relevance. I'm not going to count it out at all because, you know, it could be a really good reanimation piece. We'll have to wait and see. Here's Cathartic Reunion. It's just 2 mana for a sorcery, and as an additional cost to cast Cathartic Reunion, you discard 2 cards. And you draw 3 cards. So it's basically a Tormenting Voice on steroids. You know, you discard 1 more card, but you draw 1 more card. So you're still not actually generating any advantage, which is how these red cards usually are. But you're drawing 3 cards, and you're getting to discard 2 things to madness. Maybe you discard them and then reanimate them later. Who knows? You know, for just 2 mana, this is really good because it could have been a Tormenting Voice on steroids. They could have added another mana to the cost, but instead they're like, well, just discard 2. You know, as long as you don't generate advantage, we don't care what you do. You know, discard 5, draw 6, you know, but they're not going to do that. But in any case, this does seem pretty good. We already played Tormenting Voice, so we may end up playing this instead. And I gotta say, or alongside it, but I doubt that. I feel like you're going to make a choice, one or the other. And of course, gotta like the art, gotta at least point out the art. You know, Chandra Mom, that's Very heartwarming, Wizards. Good job. Oh, speaking of art, I did not mention that a Johnny is around. Yesterday I did a spoiler video, and it was the first time I'd seen those cards, you know, and I put the spoiler video up like 5 minutes later. Or at least I started recording it 5 minutes later. And I guess I just thought that there was like a big cat guy. I didn't identify him in my head as a Johnny, you know. Wizards has big cat dudes. But Wizards has confirmed that he is on this plane, and we'll probably see him in Aether Revolt. Wizards has confirmed a Johnny is on Kaladesh. So we'll probably see a Johnny again in card form like really soon, probably the next set. So I want to at least acknowledge that, you know, a Johnny's back. So my fourth favorite cat returning to Magic. This is Ovia Pashiri Sage Life Crafter. She's just 1 green mana for a 1/2 legendary human artificer. And you can pay 2 generic and a green and tap her to create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Or you can pay 4 generic and a green and tap her to create an XX colorless construct artifact creature token where X is the number of creatures you control. So it sort of feels like a different version of Risk the Redeemed, you know, and a fixed version. That second ability is very much fixed. You don't just basically double all the tokens and stuff, you know. You just create a really big token, which is probably a lot more manageable for Commander players. And this probably won't be like in a Commander deck all its own, although it could, you know, green artifact deck. It could totally happen, you know. It'd be fun to try and build it. But I'm not sure of the overall power level. Although 2 onboard mana sinks in Commander is very good traditionally, so there's that. But I usually talk about Standard, and I'm going to do that right here. I like that this just cost 1 green mana. This could not cost any less if they'd have wanted it to. So 1 green mana is pretty good for something that does this, although I'm not really sure about the playability. She is very removable, you know. She's going to take up your whole turns 3 or 4, you know. So or 5. I'm not 100% on her. I think that she's value, you know. She's going to create a couple of tokens for you over the course of the game, and if you're playing a strategy that plays a few artifacts, then you're going to end up getting a couple of big guys, you know. Once you have like 4 or 5 artifacts, she just sits back and makes huge dudes for you. And I do like 1-drops that have late game relevance. I really like that. So I think that she definitely has a fighting chance of being real in Standard. I'm just not 100% sold. And I know that some people are probably like, you're not sold on this, you know? I get that there's huge value on the card. It's only 1 mana and it does some really good stuff for you. It's a token generator. That's cool. So there are things I like about it. It just seems very, very fragile. And that is always a concern in competitive Magic. So we'll have to see, you know, Deathrite Shaman looked really fragile. And people are like, oh, this is terrible. And Deathrite Shaman is one of the best creatures ever printed. So we'll have to see about this. I don't think it's anywhere near that level, obviously, right? Am I wrong? But it may end up seeing some play at the end of the day. This is Captured by the Consulate. It's 4 mana. That's 3 generic and a white for an aura. Enchant creature you don't control. Enchanted creature cannot attack. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it has a single target, change the target to enchanted creature if able. Now it is tricky, and tricky's pretty good sometimes, and obviously the big draw here is that once you stick it on one of your opponent's guys, he can't just target your dudes with removal. He has to target his own guy at least once. I like that idea. I'm just think it might be priced slightly out, and I think the decks that really want to play something like this are just going to elect to play, you know, faster, more instant speed, and cheaper removal. So I'm not really feeling it, although I like the idea. Here's the final card I'm going to be covering today, and this actually got spoiled very, very late last night. This is Metalwork Colossus. It's a Colossus. It's 11 mana. 11 generic mana for an artifact creature construct. This is a 10/10, and it costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of non-creature artifacts you control. And you can sacrifice 2 artifacts to return Metalwork Colossus from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, awesome! We had a big stupid Colossus. And it makes so much sense that they do this. You know, Colossi have sort of a storied Magic history, so it doesn't surprise me they bring one back for a set based on artifacts. Obviously, this is pretty good. I'm not fooling anybody. This is obviously very, very good. First of all, it's a Colossus you can reanimate. You can dump this into your graveyard and then get it back with that white card I was showing you earlier. Like, that's really, really good. For 4 mana, that's awesome, and it shouldn't be too hard to dump it into your graveyard. This is a great reanimation target on turn 4, and if they do manage to kill it, then you can always get it back, you know. And I like the push-pull here. Obviously, cost X less to cast for each, you know, for the total converted mana cost of artifacts you control. but you can get it back if they kill it. But if you get it back, then it's going to cost more because you sacrificed a couple of artifacts. In Standard especially, I think this card is very powerful and will almost certainly see play because you can make it so cheap to cast and it will come back for you over and over. That's really good. That's all I've got for now, at least. You know what to do. If you enjoyed the content, like the content, because it tells me that you, in fact, enjoyed the content. Then go to the comments section. Let me know where I goofed up on this. Am I missing anything? Did I misjudge a card? How do you like this Colossus? I think this Colossus is really, really good. So yeah, let me know. Maybe I'm missing something on the green elf, the 1-mana elf. And I did say I think it's good and I think it has a chance. I'm just not really 100% sold, so sell me on it, please. And I will see you guys later. Subscribe if you're new for all the Kaladesh spoilers and all the crazy content. And I'll see you guys later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.